could shock you to learn that a single testimony can quietly redraw the power map of an entire city. When a suspended deputy police chief takes the stand, every pause, every denial, every carefully chosen word becomes evidence of something bigger than one man. This was not just another appearance before a commission. It was a moment where the Madlanga Commission briefly pulled back the curtain on how authority, loyalty, and silence really function inside a metropolitan police department. What unfolds in this testimony is not about theatrics, but about tension. Julius Mkhwanazi arrives carrying the weight of suspension, suspicion, and public expectation. The room is heavy with the knowledge that his answers are not only being measured for truth, but for what they reveal unintentionally. This is where power often slips, between the question and the answer. And that slippage is exactly what made this appearance impossible to ignore. Before a single allegation is addressed, something else happens. The framing of the questions signals that investigators are no longer chasing rumors. They are testing structures: who reports to whom, who authorizes what, who knew and when. These are not casual probes, they are pressure points. The commission is not just asking what happened, but how the system allowed it to happen at all. Mkhwanazi's denials come early and firmly. He rejects suggestions of impropriety, distances himself from controversial operations, and repeatedly emphasizes procedure. On the surface, it sounds like discipline. But discipline can also be a shield. In commissions like this, repetition is rarely accidental. Each return to protocol functions like a wall, sturdy but revealing in its very construction. As the questioning deepens, the testimony begins to sketch a portrait of internal relationships within the Ekurhuleni Metropolitan Police Department. Names surface. Timelines are tested. Decisions once considered routine are suddenly re-examined under harsh light. What felt ordinary inside the system now appears extraordinary from the outside. That contrast is where unease grows. There is a noticeable shift when the discussion turns to the so-called blue light saga. Here, the air tightens. Escort privileges, authority to deploy resources, and informal influence all converge in one narrative thread. Mkhwanazi insists boundaries were respected. Yet the commission seems less interested in his intent than in the environment that made such situations possible. That distinction matters. Silence becomes as telling as speech. At several moments, answers arrive slowly, cautiously. These pauses are not empty. They are filled with calculation, with awareness of consequence. In commissions of inquiry, hesitation often speaks louder than certainty. It signals that the witness understands the stakes extend far beyond the room. The testimony also exposes a recurring theme: blurred lines between professional obligation and personal proximity. Relationships with politically connected figures are acknowledged, but carefully framed as incidental. The commission presses gently but persistently, probing whether incidental truly means inconsequential. This is where the narrative widens from one officer to an entire culture of access. As the first phase of questioning closes, a subtle realization settles in. Even without a dramatic confession, something has shifted. The commission has established a baseline, a detailed map of how power claims to operate. Any contradiction later will not be measured against rumor, but against Mkhwanazi's own words. The second movement of the testimony returns with sharper focus. Investigators revisit earlier answers, not to repeat them, but to place them alongside new context. This technique is deliberate. It tests consistency under pressure. And consistency in inquiries like this is currency. Attention turns to decision-making authority during critical incidents. Who signed off? Who was informed? Who acted independently? Mkhwanazi emphasizes delegation, portraying himself as a manager rather than a micromanager. But leadership is not only about action, it is about accountability. The commission appears keenly aware of that distinction. There is an almost clinical examination of communication channels: calls, messages, briefings. Each represents a possible thread connecting official policy to informal practice. The testimony suggests order. The questioning suggests something more porous. Between those two interpretations lies the Commission's real work. At this stage, the public significance becomes clearer. This is no longer about whether one deputy chief broke rules. It is about whether the rules themselves are strong enough to resist influence. When systems depend too heavily on trust, they often fail quietly. Midway through, observers are left with an uncomfortable thought. Even if every answer is technically correct, the system described still feels vulnerable. That vulnerability is not illegal, but it is dangerous. And danger does not require intent to cause harm. As the inquiry presses on, the tone shifts again. Questions grow narrower, more surgical. Specific dates, specific movements, specific interactions. This is where memory is tested. Not memory of events, but memory of responsibility. What was remembered easily and what required effort becomes revealing. Mkhwanazi maintains composure, but the narrative he offers feels increasingly compartmentalized. Each issue is treated as separate, unrelated. The Commission seems unconvinced. Institutions rarely fail in isolation. They fail in patterns. The testimony's later stages introduce the idea of precedent. If certain actions were acceptable once, were they acceptable always? And if exceptions existed, who benefited from them? These questions hover, even when not spoken aloud. They shape how every answer is received. As the final stretch approaches, there is no dramatic collapse, no explosive revelation. Instead, there is accumulation. Layer upon layer of detail builds a structure the Commission can now examine independently. That may be the most powerful outcome of all. The finishing point arrives quietly. Mkhwanazi steps down having defended himself, yet leaving behind a record that will outlive the moment. The Commission has what it needs. Not a verdict, but a framework. From here, connections can be tested, contradictions explored, and responsibility traced without speculation. What remains is a lingering tension between legality and legitimacy. The testimony may satisfy one, but the other is still under scrutiny. And that unresolved gap is precisely why this appearance matters. Not as a spectacle, but as a signal that systems of power, once questioned, never return to their original shape.